The world is filled with dating advice podcasts. But if you need advice from a podcast for dating, should you be dating? Let's talk about it. Hi, I'm Nick. This is 10 Minutes with Nick. And today we're sort of exploring the question of the world of dating app podcasts. They're everywhere. This is kind of becoming one. And I was talking with my dad about it, who's a little bit smarter than me in most regards. And he and I were sort of going back and forth on ideas. And he said to me, it's not really a good idea for someone to be dating if they need all these dating advice podcasts. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? And he's like, well, if you need somebody on a podcast to tell you to groom yourself, to dress well, to speak well, you probably don't need dating advice. You probably got a couple basic things that you need to go back to. And he's right, quite frankly. Most dating podcasts, most podcasts that talk about men and women, and I know that I don't know if there are any LGBTQIA plus people who watch this podcast. If you do, you're welcome. I'm glad you watched 10 Minutes with Nick. Please watch more. We do a lot of Christian advice on here as well, but that doesn't mean you're excluded. That actually means you're welcomed. We'll talk about that later. But most dating podcasts turn into kind of men versus women. I was listening to one this morning with, it wasn't a dating advice podcast specifically, but it was talking about like the death of American masculinity. And I think the death of American masculinity has a lot to do with these kind of men versus women dating advice podcasts where everything is turned into either an attack on men or an attack on women. The Whatever podcast. I've made fun of those guys before. I'm a small platform. I can make fun of whoever I want. Myron and whoever his buddy is over at their podcast. These guys who just constantly belittle women. That's what dating advice is turning into. It's just turning into this belittling of women. Or, from the female side, it turns into this belittling of men. It's like, what are we doing? This isn't advice. This is just brutalizing people. It just makes no sense. And then when there is actual advice, it's like the very basics. Brush your teeth. Don't dress like a hobo, says the man in the hooded flannel and sweatpants. Sidebar. I'm in this debate with my girlfriend right now about what is and is not a flannel shirt. I argue that what I am currently wearing is a flannel shirt. It's made of soft material. It has a plaid pattern to it. I argue that that is, in fact, what one would call a flannel. She disagrees. We have not settled this debate yet, and I anticipate no settling of this debate for quite some time. I enjoy banter. I need it in my life. Coffee break. Before you get dating advice from a podcast, I would recommend you just go back to basics. Like, just think about it for a minute. You'd be a lot better off not listening to these podcasts that talk about, well, screw women, right? They're trying to kill our masculinity. You'd be better off not listening to these podcasts that are like, screw men. We don't need them. Men and women, you need each other. To the gay community, you need each other. Men need each other, like, in that sense. Men also need male friends. That's a different podcast. Focus on just the basics. Like, don't worry about all this kind of out there advice that doesn't help you. That just leads to this sort of debate. Like, don't turn into this debate of like men versus women. Why are they trying to kill masculinity? They're not. Who are they? What is they? What everybody talks about this they. That's the other thing that just comes up in any debate, not just dating advice podcasts. You got to watch out for them. Who's them? This scary other that's like looming over us all the time. I have no idea who they are. They have no face. They have no body. It's not like it's a corporation. Like I can point to it's not JP Morgan looming over me and, controlling my financial world. No. There's some elite other out there, like staring down at us, like demanding that we do all these things, or at least that's what people claim. They claim that there's this they floating above us, ruining dating, ruining relationships between men versus women. They have no effect on you. Whoever this amorphous blob is out here, they have no effect on you, and you don't need advice on how to take them down. Substitute whatever you want in there for the word they. Anything amorphous that is a concept. You don't need advice on how to not let it keep you down, because you simply just don't let it keep you down. Now, somebody's going to come at me here and somebody's going to make a comment about, what about racism and stuff like that? Term racism has no power over you. Now, racist people may be keeping you down. Racist policies, I can point to that, may be keeping you down. Same thing with sexist people and sexist policies. But we're not talking about sexism writ large. We're talking about people. And if it's people, I can point to a person. But the debate of, dating podcasts, that's what they devolve into. They don't devolve into discussing how we stop this person who we know is bad. They talk about the culture writ large. Don't fall into the trap. And if you're on a dating advice podcast, needing help on the very basics of brushing your teeth, cutting your hair, looking decent in your clothes, you don't need to go buy Gucci and all that stuff. You just need to look good in what you wear. Go to the gym once in a while. These are things that if you need to go to a dating advice podcast to hear, you need to go back to basics, some very, very basics. And that's not what you're going to find in the podcast world. That's what you're going to find outside touching grass. But I'm not critiquing you, because this is literally the great, I'm going to call it the great, it's the great deception of the modern era. This getting sucked into ostensibly advice-based podcasts that then turn into messaging on something else entirely. Somebody's offering you advice, and all of a sudden you're like, yeah, women do suck. That's not advice. I'm going to speak to my male counterparts here because I speak more to their experience than to other experiences, and I suppose I should also say if my LGBTQIA plus people are listening, I'm speaking mostly to the straight male experience. I've never been a gay man or a queer man, so I can't speak to that experience. But I suspect a lot of it's the same. If you listen to advice and walk away hating somebody, the advice is no good. It also doesn't get you anywhere. It doesn't help you. You want my advice? First of all, if you walk away from my advice and you realize it's just making you hate something, maybe it makes you hate the idea of podcasts, I don't know. Take it with a grain of salt. If you listen to the Whatever podcast and you think, gee, girls are dumb, stop listening to the Whatever podcast. It's not helping you. If you need a podcast to tell you that you need to clean up, read a book, do things that improve you, lift a weight, that's not the right podcast. You don't need podcasts. You need to go out and do those things. No matter how much you listen, young men, to David Goggins be absolutely insane and intense, and he is, if you're not actively already in the process of bettering yourself, that advice doesn't do anything for you. There are actual scientific studies that show us that when we speak things out loud or we hear things out loud, there is a risk of us getting the dopamine boost that we would get from the activity itself, meaning our brain says, wow, we did such a good job doing the thing. But we didn't do it. We listened to somebody else do it, or we gave ourselves credit for doing it. Now, there's other advice that says, yeah, sometimes speaking it out loud also creates a challenge to yourself where you have to do it, and that's possible. But I don't like that. So I'm going to throw it away because it's a 10-minute podcast and I can do what I want. Generally speaking, dating advice podcasts are worth exactly what you pay for them. You pay nothing for them. That's the joke. Anyways, I'm close to or damn near over my time. It's a 10-minute podcast. I try to stay close to that. Forgot to set a timer, so I have no idea how long I've been talking. I suppose I've been talking for as long as I need to talk, but we'll find out in the editing room. Thank you for listening. If you're new, please subscribe. If you're new and you hated it, I guess dislike the video. It's up to you. But thank you for watching. If you liked it, like the video, comment. Love comments. A lot of them are mean, but I still like them. Yeah, feed my ego. Don't take advice from podcasts, except this one. I'm Nick. This is 10 Minutes with Nick. Have a great day.